Hello and welcome to the final section of today's discussion on the ways the built environment can become resilient to flooding and overheating and other harmful effects of climate change. We're going to be talking about flood resilience through the lens or eyes of some primary school children in Bridlington, which is in East Yorkshire. So just honing in some key facts. Right now we know there's a key skills gap in the STEM sector. Around 91% of organisations currently feel as if they're struggling to hold on to talent. We need to recruit more people into STEM, but that obviously needs more people to be interested in STEM. And I'm an avid believer that interest in STEM or engineering or technology often starts very early, so at primary school age. When you look at more statistics, you also know that in engineering technology, the actual percentage of women is significantly lower than the percentage of men. This report that was done in 2017 shows that according to UCAS, about 19% of the people who are applying for engineering technology degrees were female. And then obviously we all know that once they actually leave engineering and they go into engineering at university and they go into their later careers, the amount of women who drop from doing engineering reduces more. But then when you start thinking about what the younger generation is interested in and what they're actually passionate about, we know about people like Greta Thunberg, who's a Swedish activist who really called for a change and called for the youth to come and step forward and say, what can we do about climate change? But not only her, she's encouraged thousands upon thousands of women, the youth to take action, but also in different continents around the world, such as Africa, children are standing up and saying, we want change, help us to enable change. We can't deny that climate change is occurring. Then when we look at the children we worked with in Bridlington, they're also what we call activists, but we call them junior engineers. We worked with them to understand how they can address key issues that the world is facing, such as climate change, but through the lens of engineering, in the hope that one, it will encourage them to be more interested in climate change, but also they'll see the impact engineering and technology can have in enabling world change, and also hopefully encourage them to pursue engineering careers in the future. So this picture is an image of flooding in India. I'm also going to show an image of flooding in China. These areas may feel really remote when you're speaking to children, but they recognize that there's a lot of flooding in areas of the world which they may not have been to, but also they know may be lower income than them, there may be less infrastructure. Places such as India, there's been rapid population growth with limited planning, and due to that the impact of flooding can be even more severe on people's lives and livelihoods. Then looking at this image here, it's actually showing you Bridlington Pier, which is a pier in East Yorkshire. And this pier right now, as there's been increasing sea level rising, there's been more and more evidence that there's been greater likelihood that this pier will flood, even though it has not flooded. But in other areas of Bridlington, something called Gypsy Race River, which is a key thing we're going to talk about in terms of the work we did with children, has overflooded, and it's then gone into the towns, and as you can see, into the road, and it's flooded a car. And the effect of flooding in Bridlington compared to the flooding which we see in India and China, you can see there's a stark difference in terms of the impact it has on people's lives, but it still has impacts on people's lives. And with the clear indication that as there's more and more increase in climate change, there's more increase in rising sea levels, we're going to see areas that are of lowland where there has been removal of the natural infrastructure that will prevent flooding. All of these areas become more susceptible to flooding, areas such as Bridlington. So I'm going to read a quote from one of the engineers who worked with us on this project, called Philip Ashcroft. The East Riding, which is an area in East Yorkshire, Bridlington, is in the front trenches of the battle with our changing climate. Whether it be the eroding local coastline, flooding along the course of Gypsy Race on its way to Bridlington Harbour, or seeing the wind turbines gradually filled across Bridlington Bay. So he's highlighting that climate change is a real big issue in this area of East Yorkshire. So that's why we came up with this idea to do a climate change challenge or flood challenge with the children in Bridlington on the 8th of October 2021, so not that long ago. So first of all was us within Institute of Mechanical Engineers within this particular committee for the cities and built environment. We thought it was really important that we show how we really consider how we could work with different stakeholders who are affected by climate change, as young people like children, people who are vulnerable or people who are not really necessarily listened to, and see how we can work with them, collaborate with them, and develop their skills to understand how through engineering, through problem solving, we can start to think of how we can become more resilient to climate change. We also partnered with Dream Networks, which is a social enterprise that works with children to enable them to enact change in the environment through play and through STEM workshops. One of the key volunteers I have to really thank is Phil, because he partnered with the STEM Ambassadors Network in North Midlands and with a fantastic man called Alan Hunt to be able to facilitate the workshop. We also worked with Yorkshire Water and did a project with their Living with Water campaign, where they're trying to say within certain communities such as Bridlington or such as Hull, they're going to need to live with water, and how can you live your life knowing you need to live with water, and how can you become more resilient? And in the schools we worked with, 2 schools, Haverford Primary School and Bridlington Junior School, with children from the ages of 7 to 11. So when we first went in there, we wanted to inspire them about engineering. So we said, what do engineers do? Everything. In fact, we showed them there are many, many different types of engineering. There's many different ways to engage in engineering. But not only are there many types of engineering, engineers are all problem solvers. And we look to see how we can address issues that the world is facing within the society and also within the environment. The key engineering challenge we had was to look at Gypsy Race River. And Gypsy Race River is a river that runs through Bridlington, like I mentioned before, and due to climate change, it's been more likely to be susceptible to flooding. And it's also surrounded by parks and homes, which the children themselves already know. So their challenge was to do something really local and think about how they can reduce the impact of the Gypsy Race flooding if it did flood. So like I said, they were problem solvers. So they worked in pairs to be able to think about how they can make a part of the Gypsy Race River physically. Then they thought about how they can create solutions if there was a heavy downfall of rain due to the rising sea levels, also potentially flooding. And then they worked together to think about how they can do solutions. This was very playful. I told you we worked with Dream Networks, which is a playful social enterprise, but also the volunteers, Alan and Phil, were very playful. So were the teachers, so were the volunteers from Yorkshire Water. So I'm showing you some images because sometimes it can feel a bit abstract unless you can see some images of the areas we worked. So this is, you can see Gypsy Race River Park here, and also a playground. So the children know of that playground. They know if this area is flooded, our playground is going to be destroyed. So again, it's something they can really feel themselves emotionally. She initially gave them a few ideas about how you can prevent just overall flooding. So things such as being able to soak it up with sandbags, simple things such as water butts that people use to drain water away. We talked about raising buildings. We also spoke to them about green roofs. We said, how can we stop the river from flooding? And we really helped them explore and experiment, as engineers do. And we said, what else? So I've explained some of the process to you, but I think it will be even more, exciting if one of the children show you what they did.
So we had some trees, and in the trees we were trying to represent flooding. So we had different materials like rocks from the climbing sets and gravel and sand and dirt, and the job was to try and stop the flooding. And then we had like a watering can to represent rain, flooding and things like that, and we were trying to come up with solutions. First we just used like gravel, and then we had silly items like jelly, sponges, and tried to see if those would work as well.
And why do you think it's so important that we use our curiosity and our problem-solving skills in that way?
Because with climate change, now floods are becoming much more often, and it's even more dangerous.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed it to use different type of stuff to stop flooding, like for example clearing stuff, and it was very fun to do with not only me but also other people really enjoyed it. But
what did you learn?
We basically learned how to stop flooding from like spreading like in towns and stuff.
And why is that so important?
It's really important because like for people like us, we live right next to the Gypsy River, and the Gypsy River sometimes when it's really bad weather it can start flooding.
So it's important in Bridlington, and what about globally?
And globally flooding can also destroy like animals, homes and stuff, and it can also just make the planet a bad place.
Brilliant, and we don't want that for your future, do we? No. That's amazing, thank you so much.
It's so important that we look after our planet. We want a cleaner, greener future with no pollution, happy animals and a happy and safe life.
Our children are so concerned about the future of the planet, and we've been working really hard to help them to understand the problem and to think about ways we can raise awareness and help to tackle it. That's why we're so pleased to have been involved with this brilliant workshop, and the children have learned so much about COP26 and they're really hoping for change.
One of the things that Phil, as I mentioned, also said was it was inspiring to see how all the children took part in interactive discussions about climate change and also its effects on water cycle, leading to future increased flooding events. Also, they're generating innovative ideas for flooding potential solutions on how to prevent and resolve flooding events, and then engineer solutions from the items in Alan's climate battle boxes. And I'll soon show you some more of Alan's climate battle box. So you can see one of the children is actually pouring water into a box they've used to recreate the Gypsy Race River. Then the children are thinking about how they can also add more water by playing with, in a playful manner, playing with water balloons and spattering it over that space and seeing what occurs. Then they're integrating different kind of materials. As you can see in this image, Alan's helping them in this situation to see how they can try and prevent the flooding. Like one of the children mentioned things such as clay, etc. But what can they do to the natural landscape to prevent the flooding? And then this is an image of some of the children just showing their work. And that was fantastic because they were so excited to show what they've been able to do. And what I didn't mention is they did this in less than an hour and 40 minutes. They went through this whole process, came up with great solutions, presented them in less than an hour and 40 minutes. So that's amazing. We've got another video from some of the younger children from Hitherthorpe Junior School, the junior engineers as young as 7 years old. Their actual audio is a bit quieter, so it might be a bit harder to hear, but I think it's really important to share their voice and their contribution as junior engineers.
If the degrees went up each day, the ice would melt. They can stop preventing flooding by using defences and walls. We can use porous materials like planting trees and grass.
I like stopping the water from flooding the trees so they don't get knocked down. Like we use clay, gravel and rocks.
So as you can hear, the children are using different methods. Some are using more natural defences, so thinking about using clay, using trees, and some of them are thinking of more traditional routes such as flood defences. Our final quote from Phil, who was one of the key volunteers, says that seeing so many budding engineers enjoying the task of finding solutions to the problems associated with flooding was a pleasure and filled me with hope for the future. They are all a superb credit to themselves, their schools, and their community. Any more than that. So before we finish and have some Q&A, I thought it would be great to leave you with a photo montage that one of the teachers has made that really puts together some of the ways the children collaboratively work together to think about how they could address the key issues facing their community, such as flooding, and see how their skills can be developed as budding engineers to resolve the issues that they're facing now and potentially will also face in the future.